Hey, welcome everybody to Martinis with Scott, a rare morning edition. I'm actually on coffee this morning. But cheers anyways. I hope you're watching this more in the evening hours and having yourself a cool beverage on a hot August day. Salut. So today we're gonna talk about updating the Novanni Stainless journey, including the listening tour, the importance of getting together as in person rather than on Zoom or Skype or email or text message or what have you. We're going to talk about negotiation. There's a bunch of things that are on the list here that we'll try to get through today. I did want to say before we start that, before we start that I've had 5 complaints in the last week about the untimeliness of Martinis with Scott. Basically, I'm not showing up at the bar at 4 p.m. Eastern, as is the covenant here. And scheduling is always difficult. And as I'm trying to take us through a journey, I have to wait for the events of the week to unfold before I start preparing the show. And then I just haven't been getting it done on time. And last week I had to travel. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I love the fact that you guys are looking forward to the show. The engagement time is way up on Martinis with Scott. I think our average viewing time the last several videos has been, upwards around 20 minutes on an average. When we first started Martinis with Scott, I think our average view time was about 3 minutes, and then it grew to 8, and we were pretty excited. And that means that some of the audience watches the whole thing, and people do it in parts. I think if you watch it, turn it off, come back, watch some more, turn it off, come back, that shows up as 3 views with a third of the time, theoretically. Bottom line is the engagement has gone way up, and I know that some people are waiting in anticipation for these episodes. So we're going to try and get them back on the Thursday at 4 p.m. Starting next week, so that we have some regularity to this. I had one fellow at Novanni who was giving me a hard time and made me laugh that he got up at 3 a.m. on Friday morning to watch last night's Martinis with Scott before he went to work, and then it wasn't even posted yet. I have another who's actually a client of mine that I work night and day to help him improve his business, and yet he's complaining that my Martinis with Scott are not on time, so he can watch that. Makes me laugh. Good thing I love you. All right. Novanni Stainless, I think we're into, 6 or 7 updates on Novanni Stainless. For the background, if you're just joining us and you're new to Martinis with Scott, this is a company, a somewhat troubled business that is a proud Canadian manufacturer of residential and commercial stainless steel sinks, proud Canadian manufacturer in a small town in Northern Ontario. A town of, I don't know the population, but 1,500, 1,700 feels about right. And we employ, close to 50 people or somewhere in that range. It changes every day, being manufacturing, and we will be growing. So it's a significant employer in the area is the point. I bought it in late June. We consider July our first month of the turnaround, and July went pretty well. And, this company is at no risk. In my view, I think that we're going to be a success. We will have to restructure the balance sheet at some point. We're just trying to figure out how to go about that. But Sinclair Range, my company, owns 100% of the shares of Novanni and some of the related companies that hold some of the real estate up there. And we also bought the first secured debt from the bank. We bought it at a discount because it needed to be discounted. And so we hold the security, which gives us the ability to go through a restructuring process to clean up the balance sheet and to save these jobs. So I think we're in pretty good shape on that front. And there's a whole series on Martinis with Scott of the turnaround journey, which I'm trying to share with you, not only so you understand Novanni better and that you understand Sinclair Range better and you understand me better, but along the way we're picking up important business advice and lessons, and we're going through that journey together. And the whole point of Martinis with Scott is to affect change, to create winning momentum in life and in business. And so what better way than to share a journey of a turnaround? All right, so last week I posted on Martinis with Scott, I think it went out last Sunday, a speech that I gave, an address to my second address to the employees of Novanni. And so what happened was I've been doing my listening tour, which I'll talk about in a minute or in a bit. And the listening tour is such a fascinating experience. And so we've been doing them by Zoom. I've done a couple in person now. And it's trying to spend just an open hour with every single employee. Nobody's more important than anybody else. In fact, I'm not even selecting the order. It's just who's available, and someone at the office has been figuring this out for me. And I ultimately want to get through everybody. It's a huge time commitment. It may take a year before I get through every single person, but it's an open discussion. You know, I've just been asking the employees, just give me your job title, how long you've been around, what do you actually do day to day, and that provides some context. But then what's wrong with Novanni in your view? How could we be better? What do you see? And what you get is just this huge influx of information. And we'll talk about sort of what I've learned already in this very enlightening experience. But one thing I learned last week, to come back to that part of the story, is that when we first bought the company, employees were relieved and very excited about change and someone who's enthusiastic about their business, because honestly, we have a great team at Novanni. I've been really impressed. There's not, the usual kind of backstabbing and hiding going on that you see in troubled businesses. I honestly believe it's because of the small town culture in Northern Ontario, and what a great benefit for me in trying to affect change. These are just good people, and I love it. But one of the messages I got last week was look, we were really excited when you came in, but you're not here all the time, and we don't know what's going on, and so it's kind of morale has dropped back down in 4 weeks or 5 weeks back down to where it was. It's been a bit of a disappointment, perhaps, and that is a I don't express it as a criticism. It's just they're telling me how they feel, and I need to respect that. And it wasn't from everybody, but it was from some key people. And I think that's on me. As a leader, that's on me. And so I rearranged my week last week, and I got on a flight the next day, and I got my ass out to Novanni so that I could show some FaceTime. And I run multiple businesses. It could be 5, could be 10 at any given time. I'm the president, or I'm a CRO, which is a chief restructuring officer, or I'm a director, an executive director. So I'm basically running the place, or I'm an advisor and highly integrated into the management team of numerous companies in numerous jurisdictions. We've been in 27 countries, I think, in the last, say, decade. North America and Europe predominantly, and a lot of islands as well. And so I'm not there full time. I'm just not. It's impractical. So I have a great team that helps me. We have a system as to how I can manage all of this. But here's the reality is that, and it's an important message in the times of COVID, in the times of a pandemic, and everybody's moving to Zoom and to Microsoft Teams and to Skype and to these other platforms, and everybody thinks that office space is going to go away. There's going to be less of a demand as there's a change in the culture of work environments. And what you need, Sinclair Range has been a virtual firm for a long time because I don't like spending money on real estate. I'd rather spend it on other things to invest in our business. So we have a system to deal with this, but even at Sinclair Range, and especially if you're trying to affect change, you just can't forego FaceTime. You have to show up. You have to be there. You have to sit in front of people. People need human interaction. And I don't see that changing. In fact, I think you're going to have the pendulum's going to swing over here, and then it's going to start coming back. And there'll be some sort of hybrid solution to this. But if you're running a business, you need to show up. You need to have a system to show up. And so so that was on me. I wasn't showing up enough. I wasn't communicating enough. And so, as I said, on one day's notice, I got out there, which is a full day of travel for me. It's like 12 hours to get from here to there. And I did. And I think it was effective. I think it helped that it started a communication. It shows that we care, you know, that people in times of change experience hope, and they experience fear. And in small businesses, in entrepreneurial environments, you also have hope and you have fear. And so you need leadership. You need leadership to tell people what's going on and to guide them through that. And leaders sometimes also need a kick in the ass. If you're a leader of your business, you need to listen to your people, and maybe me more than most need that kick in the ass, because I'm easily distracted by a million other things. And, you know, I get my head down, I get focused on something. So I'm grateful that this message was said, and I received it, and that's what I did. I got out there, and if you think you can run your business by FaceTime or some other technology of that sort, well, you can't. You need to rethink that. You need to incorporate those video. We had a Zoom call with a supplier last night in Asia, and it was terrific. You just get this warm feeling when you see somebody on video instead of, you know, a more combative or frustrating experience through email. I think we solved their problems. I think it was a terrific call. Like the technology is great, but you also need to be there, and you need as much as possible, and you just need to have human interaction to get things moving. So I gave a speech, an address to the employees as part of my trip to Novanni last week, which is, you can see it on Martinis with Scott on our last episode. And in that, I just said, hey, I'm going to address you on a regular basis, say monthly. We're going to talk about what we accomplished last month, good or bad. So I talked about July, and July was a terrific first month. We actually broke even, made a little bit of money, so we stopped losing money. We had a record sales month, and it's not really sales; it's more deliveries. We actually produced the product and got it out the door. We had a record month, and for 2020, sorry, not for, you know, the history of this company, which was much larger. And, you know, we're moving things in the right direction. And then I talked about my goals for August. What am I going to be focusing on? And the key ones were sanitation. And sanitation means just nothing magic, just general cleanliness. The plant, the office space, the washrooms, the lunch area. And it's such an important thing in a turnaround is to work on how would I express this? I don't want to say just cleanliness, but the orderliness of the space that you work in and that you live in. If you're trying to improve your day-to-day, most troubled companies, they just look bad because the pride has left the employee base. It's a sense of hopelessness. It's a symbol of hopelessness, but the pride is still you know, deep down with all the employees. It sure as hell is at Novanni. Like I said, it's a great team. And so if there's some leadership that says, hey, this is important, we need to be happy and orderly in our work environment, then I think the people will step up and we'll get some resources. We literally don't have a janitorial staff at this company because in the turnover, in the losing of labor, that's somebody that was lost and wasn't replaced. So you know, cleanliness, brightness, orderliness, you know, just making people feel that they're in a happy, productive, warm place is really important in my view. Being orderly and clean and bright adds to safety, obviously. What else do I have here at this point? I did a turnaround about 2 years ago. I won't mention the name of the company. Also in manufacturing, much larger company. And when I went there the first day and did the tour, the back plant, which was huge, was dark. There was puddles on the floor. It was dingy. It was clean enough, but it wasn't really clean, and it just didn't have the feel of being clean. And it was just not a happy place to work. and they were losing a lot of money. And within a year, we were making some money, and now they're knocking it out of the park. I talked to the owner yesterday or 2 days ago. They're doing great now, but the turnaround took hold. But the biggest transition optically, you can see these customers that come in and tour the plant from time to time, and they're significant names, global names that we're buying from this company, and they, their fill rates have gone from really low to 100%. Their quality's gone up. They're not having, return stock and all this sort of stuff. Like, everything's great, but the wow factor is when they come to tour the plant every 6 months, and the improvements and the brightness and the cleanliness. And it just brings in new business, and the employee base is happier. So it's a huge part of everything. Sanitation at Novanni is a big deal. Appearances are a big deal for me in that manufacturing setting, and we're starting that process in August. Does that mean that they're going to have a brighter, cleanlier plant in August? No, it's going to be a process. It's going to be a system, and the first part is to hire some janitorial staff. So we're out trying to do that right now. A second major goal in August is maintenance, and when I say maintenance, that would be your regular everyday maintenance, preventive maintenance, and large major capital expenditure projects. We do not have a system for that. What we have is some maintenance people who care and do a good job and do their best off the top of their head. Like, they wander around, they look at it and say, we need to change this oil, we need to change that belt, this and that and the other thing. But there's no formalized system that integrates what these maintenance people are doing with what management needs them to do, with a proper preventative maintenance plan, with a CapEx schedule. And so if you can't measure it, if you don't have a system, you're not managing it, and things are going to go wrong. So that's a big issue, because we've had breakdowns. That also ties into the sanitation and the look of the plant, and protecting ourselves from catastrophic failure. God forbid that should ever exist. So what we've agreed to do is we're putting together just our wish list, a laundry list of everything that needs to be done in the plant, both regularly on a small fix and a major fix basis. And then we're going to allocate those into what we agree. We're going to see what we agree with, what we don't agree with as a senior management team, and then we're going to prioritize them, and we're going to create a system. And once we create the prioritized list, we'll know what resources we need in terms of human resources and in terms of financial resources. Because what happens is, you have a maintenance person coming to you and say, well, I need an electrician, or I need some other resource. Excuse me, I need some other resource. How do you know? I believe them. They need another resource, or two other resources, or some capital in the budget. They need these things, but how do we know what needs to come first? And when there's differing opinions and we don't have a full laundry list, we don't even know what skill set to go hire. So first step is this laundry list. We're working on that in August. What else are we doing in August? We're looking at some SKUs, and we're moving to a build to schedule rather than building to order. So we're going to get some finished goods. So here's the background story. We did a quick analysis, and I found, not that the people at Novanni didn't know this already, but we found it on my team, that 7.5% of our SKUs, which we have a lot of SKUs, but 7.5% of them generate 80% of the revenue. And in fact, it might even be less than 7.5%, because there's some commonality in the SKUs. Like, if you have the exact same sink with one hole in it, and then you can take that sink and put two holes in it, and that's two different SKUs, so it kind of expands out that way. Anyways, a very small number of products generate 80% of our revenue. We should not be producing those to order. We should be creating a week or two of finished goods of those products, which I estimate to be sort of $100,000 capital investment, or working capital investment, into inventory. So when we get an order, we just go pick it and we ship it right away. And so that's a goal for August. And if you think about the implications of being successful at that, well, it's huge. It's huge. It means less changeovers. It means stability in our purchasing requirements. It means great fill rates on those SKUs. I mean, we could literally ship it tomorrow if the customer wants. I mean, those are the benefits. Many of you know, if you've paid attention to Martinis with Scott, that I own a business in Ottawa named Roofers World, which creates, builds tools, designs and builds and sells tools to the roofing industry through many of the same channels as Novanni does. Think Home Depot and Lowe's and Rona and although Roofers World has much more of a U.S. presence than Novanni does. And when I took over, I think it was April 2019, thereabouts, on Roofers World, again, the fill rate was terrible. And now orders are through the roof, like literally through the roof. We just had a record week this week already, and probably just under 10% of our annual revenue we did basically this week. So we're gonna kick ass on our annual revenue targets even during a COVID year. But the point being, the orders come in and we're shipping the next day because we have the product in stock, and we're not having the delays and the lumpiness in revenue caused by shortages, and there's really no backlog at all. Whereas at Novanni, we have a significant backlog that we need to get through. So this idea of building to schedule, which I'm told through my listening tour is what when this business was much larger and much more successful. It was owned by LK, I believe, out of the Chicago area. That's what they did. And then, of course, as the SKUs kept expanding and expanding, and the raw materials list and the BOMs expanded and expanded, it becomes more, and then you run out of money and it just becomes more difficult. So we're going to go back on the limited number of SKUs to doing that. And, you know, so those are kind of the August things: sanitation, maintenance, and building out the finished goods on those limited SKUs. I talked in my address about systems versus goals. Very important for business owners and managers, and even in life, just to understand the difference between a system and a goal. You know, I always use the example that a goal for me is, say, to lose 20 pounds and be healthier. And that's great. That's an awesome goal. Many of you have that same goal. What does it accomplish for you? And the answer is nothing. Whereas a system, so those are goals, and a system is to exercise every day and to not eat carbs or grains. Okay, so that's a system. I'm going to commit to exercise every day and not eat carbs, simple carbs, sorry, and not eat grains. Okay, that would be a system, right? And what you end up with by doing that is you end up heading towards your goal. Now, goals are important. They're really mentally important because human beings need an aim. They need a general direction, because without that, you just can't live. You can't make decisions and evaluate all of the information coming at you unless you have a general aim. But it doesn't need to be a specific aim, and it's not going to do you any good to have an aim in terms of implementing things. You need to have a system. And so on maintenance, we're going to work on the system, which I described to you. On sanitation, we're going to work on a system that I described to you. And on improving our fill rates and reducing changeovers and not having shutdowns during the day, we're going to work on a system which starts with this finished good idea that I talked about. I disclosed to the employees in this address some hard numbers for July, which were edited out of the Martinis with Scott version of that address. And it was great because you sit in the back, you're working, it's hot out, it's hot in the plant, it's dirty, it's dingy, you got shutdowns, you don't have all the raw materials you need, and you're feeling down about yourself. And then if someone comes along and says, hey, we actually had a really good July, thank you very much for putting forward that hard work, I think it reinforces the message that there's a positivity here. You always need to, you're trying to affect change, you do that by focusing on the positive. And the positives here are the great team. We fixed supply chain so far. We fixed a bunch of things already, and we're going to start seeing some results. Yeah, so that was the address to the employees. I want to talk about Novanni, about the listening tour. Uh, Again, I've explained what this is, and it's me spending an hour and just having an open forum. Tell me what you've always wanted to tell the boss about the company that you work in, good or bad, doesn't matter. What would you like to see changed? And what happens is you just get this huge amount of information brought to you, and you start to see commonality. Do you believe 100% of what people tell you? Well, you believe it in the sense that they're not lying to you. I mean, they're telling you the truth. It's their lived truth. It's their experience. It's their truth with the filter that they have on. But maybe changes shouldn't be made on all of those things. But eventually, and like really quickly, what you find is there's a hot list of a few things or a lot of things that everybody agrees with, and it becomes painfully obvious that this is a problem. These things are a problem. They're the low-hanging fruit for affecting change. And the other thing that happens, and we're not there at Novanni yet, but when you do this, there's just 100% correlation between troubled companies and there being a complete disconnect from what employees think their job is and what management thinks their jobs is. Like for 30 years, I've been seeing this. So you say to a CEO or a business owner, okay, we're gonna talk to these 10 key people in this organization. What are their jobs? What do they do every day? What's important? And the business owner, the CEO will tell you that. And then you go ask those people, what's your job? I know what your title is, but what's your job in reality? What do you do every day? What do you focus on? And it's always different. 100% of the time, it's different. All right. And so you can't affect change unless you're on the same page with the people that are doing the work. And that's what performance appraisal systems ought to be doing. They ought to be prioritizing the change that you need. And as a president of a business, as an owner of a business, even small entrepreneurial businesses, if your key employees don't wake up in the morning and know the three things that are critical every single day in their job, then you have failed as a president. It's not your employee that's failed. You have failed in communicating that information. And so that's also part of a listening tour or the start of it. But really, at this stage, I'm focusing on what's wrong with Novanni and what can be better. And here's the list that I've come up with so far from this listening tour. So we have a labor shortage and a lot of turnover. Why? Well, we're at the low end of the pay scale. So we're competing in a tight labor market in that area. We're competing with bigger city centers that are not too far away. And we're at the low end of the scale is the bottom line. A big issue is we switched to a 4-day week during COVID. I was not there. I'm not second guessing that decision. I don't know that it was right or wrong. But I think it was something that the existing ownership at the time and management felt they needed to do to hunker down during COVID. But as a result, employees that were really not making much above minimum wage on an hourly basis, all of a sudden have moved to a 4-day week, and they can't afford to live, I assume. And so they look for other opportunities. So that was a big hit to us in reality with hindsight. We're competing against government payments. Right during COVID, there's been, appropriately so, I would say, direct payments, direct compensation to employees from the government. Maybe it's easier for them to stay home and collect a check than it is to come into work and slog in a hot and dirty environment to collect maybe less money than the government's giving you to stay home and play on your Nintendo. So that's a problem. There's an unhappy environment, according to a number of the employees, right? So there's this whole morale issue and things that I've talked about in terms of sanitation. And they don't bring up sanitation; they just talk about a sense of losing. And this show is about having a sense of winning. right? I think it's the most important thing in life and in business is direction. Where are we moving to? Do we have momentum? Is it a positive momentum? Is it a negative momentum? And so that was brought up, and a huge fear factor. A fear factor of management. I don't know the reality of that, but I need to take it really, really seriously, because there's a lived experience that is important, and there's a lived experience that's important, and we didn't take that seriously. We need to change that culture. Whether the underlying substance of what's causing that is accurate or not doesn't matter. It's the perception of the employee that matters, and I need to take that seriously. What are the implications of these labor problems and why there's such turnover and shortage? Is inexperienced operators, which affects productivity. It affects safety. Temp labor. You start using temp labor, which is even worse than full-time inexperienced operators. It's too expensive to have temp labor. They're not trained. It jeopardizes productivity. It jeopardizes safety again. And because we're running short, we used to have 2 people at this station. Now we have 1 person covering 2 or 3 stations. The capacity has been limited by about 40% off the top of my head, which is a problem. It's a problem. It's not a huge problem because we don't necessarily have the orders today, but we need to, there's no point spending much money on sales and marketing if we can't produce to keep up even with the back orders that we have today. So there's some fixing to do on the labor side. Seems to be a consensus that we have way too many SKUs. And SKUs, for those of you that don't know, are really products that we make. You could make 4 products, or you could make 400 different products. Those are called SKUs, SKEWS. And I talked about how 7.5% of them generate 80% of our business. Here's something that you need to do in business and in life. I think it's exactly the same. If you have lost your way, if you're not performing, if you have negative momentum, if things are going wrong, you need to take a step back. As far as you need to go back, it could be 1 step, could be 100 steps back. Go back to basics and win. And win at what you're trying to do. Dominate that little teeny space, no matter what it is, and then start growing again from there. Don't shut down the other stuff unless it's draining cash out of you, but don't try to fix everything at once, because you can't. Dominate one critical core thing at a time. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to look at that 7.5% of SKUs. We're going to build those finished goods. And we're going to get 100% fill rates on the 80% of our revenue. And then we're going to start revisiting the other SKUs from there and make a decision as to what we ought to do about them. Same thing in building a brand. This applies to everything in business. If you want to build a brand, how do you compete against the larger companies and the larger brands that exist? Well, what you do, obviously, you need to know who you are. You need to differentiate yourself. You need to to have the content. You need to do all those things. But what you really need to do is you need to do that within a niche, and you need to hammer that niche, and you need to win it. You need to win it, a small little category. And when you've won that category, you need to move on from there and grow and keep winning. What you can't do is have a Goliath over here and you be a David and just kind of go against them, because you're going to get hammered. But you can break it off. You can have this little piece and you can dominate that and build from there. What else are we listening to? Our maintenance, deteriorating equipment, and we've already talked about that. The plant is filthy and yucky, were the words I'm getting. I've already told you my views on that, and sanitation, taking pride in your workspace, in your living space, and it really comes down to pride in a sense of winning. Super important. Too many changeovers middays. So when you're in manufacturing, really any sort of process manufacturing, and you build this product and then you need to stop and change all your dies. I'm getting different estimates to build the next product. And I'm getting all sorts of estimates of what that changeover takes in terms of time, but let's call it 60 minutes at least, maybe 90 minutes. And what's all your direct labor doing during that time? Is there they're standing around or they're doing make work projects. And so it's not an efficient way. You want to, in manufacturing as much as possible, if you're building this today, you want to build as many as you possibly can, as you need, and then tomorrow move to the same thing. And that's not always going to work, but it's the goal. Buying the right materials at the right time. I don't know if this is a supply chain issue or maybe it's just a lack of cash before the supply chain was fixed, which we did in July. So I'm just going to keep my eye on that one. Huge scrap and wastage. This is interesting. I've started a deeper dive into this to see what's going on and start putting some math to it. This is based on some of the employees' experience at other manufacturing companies. They're surprised by the amount of our scrap and waste, which of course affects your direct materials. It affects your contribution margin. You want to make more money in any business. Contribution margin first, overhead second, revenue third. This is a direct hit on contribution margin. Contribution margin is your variable costs divided by your revenue, and you end up with a percentage. Your variable costs are always direct materials. Well, in a manufacturing plant, are always direct materials, direct labor, freight, maybe some sales commissions, and of those components, direct materials is by far the largest, usually. Certainly is here. And if you have too much wastage, well, that's a direct hit on that direct materials number. So that's one that's certainly come to mind for me. Standard costing has not been updated and reviewed in 4 years. This is an accounting system issue that is just a nightmare. So the idea of standard costing in accounting is that you have, let's say you have a manufacturing plant and you want to know what your cost is per unit, which you need to know that for accounting, because you need to know how to value your inventory. You make a widget, goes into inventory. At what price should that go into inventory? And then when you sell it, what happens? Like, is it removed from inventory at this price? And what is in that price when you put it into inventory? Is it just direct materials, like we said, or is it direct materials plus the direct labor to manufacture this thing? What about the fact that you have machines that are depreciated, a building that's depreciated? Do you start including a per unit piece of that, let's say, depreciation into the cost of the product into inventory? And if you start doing that, it's called absorption costing. You're taking all of your overheads and you're putting them on a per unit basis. And at the end of the day, that's kind of standard costing. Standard costing is you say, okay, my overheads are $1 million. I'm going to make 1 million units this year, and so that's $1 per unit is part of my standard costing, and I use that to put my units into my inventory and as my cost when I sell them. So that's all cool if you know that your 1 million units that you produce this year are more or less going to be 1 million units, right? So if you made 1 million in units, then your standard costing was off, right? Because it's no longer $1 per widget that you made, and you just treat that as a variance quarterly or at year end, and it's no big deal. But what if you made 500,000 units or 100,000 units because you're a troubled company? And what if you made 100,000 units this quarter, but the next quarter you made 2 million units and you're all over the place or you're experiencing rapid growth? Well, what happens is your standard costing becomes gibberish, right? And then what happens if you've been cutting back on your accounting resources and nobody ever looks at these standard costs anymore, they're just in some sort of black box accounting system, well, it becomes gibberish. And if it's gibberish, your pricing decisions don't make any sense. Troubled companies and high growth companies should never make pricing decisions based on standard costs. They should make them on contribution margin and variable costs. Your inventory costing makes no sense. Your cost of sales makes no sense. And to some extent, this is all an artificial discussion and accounting discussion, except when it all comes home to roost when you do an inventory count and a proper valuation tied to non-standard costs, but to real costs. Then all of a sudden you thought you were making money and you lost a ton of money, or you lost a ton of money and all of a sudden you end up making money. It just makes your day-to-day reporting kind of useless. So anyways, this is a big deal. I see it all the time in troubled companies, and it's not an easy fix, but it does need to be done. With the loss of, with the turnover and the lack of labor in the back, we've got more managerial types, senior types, experienced types that have a higher wage doing lower wage jobs, which of course is a really expensive solution, and it also means they're not doing the things they ought to be doing. Health and safety, we have, thank God, we have a pretty good record on health and safety, but I'm told from the listening tour that employees are concerned that we're not respecting necessarily health and safety protocols, training, and these sorts of things. So we need to get right on that so that we don't have an accident waiting to happen in the future. So these are sort of the things that I'm getting from the listening tour, which is a long list. Some of it impacts profitability, some of it impacts cash flow, some of it is on the defensive side, like maintenance, health and safety, but really important, critical things. And so when you're dealing with the turnaround, when you're trying to affect change in business, if you're trying to affect change in your life, you need to remember that you can't do everything all at once. So you take and in many of the things that I just listed, and I'm sure I'm going to have 100 more. First of all, I didn't even tell you about, there's a bunch more, but I'm going to have 100 more from continuing this listening tour. And a bunch of these are symptoms, and a bunch, and some of them are causes, right? And so, for example, the labor issue, the turnover is a symptom. But what is it a symptom of? Is it of wages? Is it of morale? Is it some of all of this stuff? The trick to this is to identify which ones are symptoms and which ones are causes. And if they're a symptom, what are they a symptom of? And that's the key. You need to start working through them and figure that out. Okay, so that's my listening tour. It gives you some flavor of the challenges that I'm facing in affecting change in this business. If you're depressed by that list, don't be. It's so consistent. The patterns of troubled companies, I was thinking about this the other day, the patterns of troubled companies are just repeat themselves over and over and over. It's like a Harlequin romance novel. There's like 3 plots. I never read these, by the way, but I'm told. There's sort of 3 plot lines, but in hundreds of books, they just repeat those plot lines over and over with different characters and different settings in different details that bring nuance to that. Working in troubled businesses is the same thing. It's just you just see the same set of problems over and over with different characters and different storylines attached to the exact same set of problems. I'm not depressed by this. I think we've done a great job actually identifying the issues, and I can see where we're going. And the trick is to manage our investment in this, manage my investment in this thing as we go forward, because it adds up. Everything adds up, and so there you go. Hired a new employee at Sinclair Range last week. A guy I know by the name of Avi, and Avi is a wizard at everything technological, and he combines that with an operational MBA. The relevance of this to Novanni Stainless is that the accounting system is Sage, and my experience with Sage is, for smaller businesses, troubled businesses, is very few people, if anybody, knows how to use it. So, and what I mean by that is the accounting people know how to put in their debits and credits and record things. But if you want to dive in and do some data analysis, if you want to build a report, if you want to track something, it's a really difficult tool to use. And in fact, you need to buy third-party reporting software to layer on top of it. Avi's an expert at this stuff. If you're trying to affect change, you need good information. You need good data. It doesn't drive everything. Your gut is really important in this, but you do need good data. And if you're working with a complicated accounting system, a database system like Sage, you need a resource to dive into this thing and create the products and create the integrity and data that you need. Running out of time, so let's, where are we, 45 minutes. So let's jump And to just wrap this thing up, I'm going to give you an update on Mary next week. We're really close to a settlement that accomplishes most of my goals. Mary is a story, if you've missed it from a few episodes ago, I'll redo that briefly and tell you where we ended up and give you my thinking on negotiation strategy and how to deal with difficult partners and that sort of stuff. Roofers World, we're going to schedule a show shortly on that with Lucy, probably into September. And as I mentioned before, we're just knocking it out of the park. I had a call from an inquiry from a listener of Martinis with Scott, interested in a career in turnaround, which is cool. And then we tried to have a call yesterday and it didn't work out for whatever reason. But for those of you that are interested in the space, just let me give you my ideas as to what you need to be successful. There's no formula for this, but 100% for sure. And if you could see this from my laundry list, from the listening tour, 100% for sure, you need to have a multidisciplinary skill set, and you need to be curious. Okay, what do I mean by multidisciplinary? You need to have financial and legal and operations experience, not experience, but smarts. You need to have smarts on that, marketing smarts. And I guess those are your key ones. But the point being, if you look at the list of problems that we have at Novanni, for example, it takes a rare individual to be able to deal with all of those areas at some level of depth without going to outside professionals and paying a bunch of fees that are going to kill a company of that size. Anyway, so as many different areas of expertise or understanding that you can create, the better off you're going to be. Some might call that an expanded talent stack, but just try to learn and be curious in all different areas of management and running a business. But you need to be an expert in financial. As you can see from the journey that we've been on Novanni Stainless and a bunch of the other shows that I've done, having a financial background or a hard financial understanding is really, really important. Same with legal, maybe not as important, but ultimately, if it's a real turnaround, if it's a hardcore turnaround, by definition, some stakeholders are not going to be happy. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be restructuring. There's going to be legal threats. And if you're throwing that out to a law firm every time that sort of things happens, you're just going to be accruing a bunch of fees. That's going to make this way more expensive. I like to say that I know 80% of almost everything in this world, in this business world, not 100%, but 80% of almost everything, which at least allows me to know what I don't know and what questions I need to ask and to do deep dives on specific situations. But I have a general direction without paying a bunch of fees on it, which helps me tremendously. You have to be able to operate well in a crisis and under stress. People in the insolvency community, friends of mine, always laugh that they find it amazing that, what freaks out a management team doesn't even seem like an issue to the person who's dealing in the insolvency. And the reason is because they deal with it every day. What causes stress in a crisis is the fear of the unknown. If you've been through it before, you know more about it. You kind of have a general sense of where this is going to go, so you're not fearful, so you're less stressed. Okay, there's a reason this show's called Martinis with Scott. It's not like I'm immune to the stress of this. I like to have my drink at the end of the day, but you need to be able to operate in that environment. You need to love the fast pace, and that's a really, really important part. And you need to be persuasive, because to affect change, you need to persuade people to change. And there's a whole body of work of understanding how to be persuasive. Some people are more natural at it than others. But if you can't affect change, you're useless in turnarounds, right? By definition, things need to turn around. They need to be different, and therefore they need to change. There's a global organization called the Turnaround Management Association. You can Google it. It might be tma.org, but don't hold me to that. They have chapters all over the place. I think they're headquartered out of Chicago. They have an online accreditation program and learning program. If you're going to be in the turnaround business, you need to belong to the TMA. They're the number one they're the number one or the only organization that's really focused on turnarounds as opposed to just pure insolvencies. I had another topic here on negotiations and aluminum tariffs and Trump and all that sort of stuff, but I'm running out of time, so maybe we'll attack that another day. And I think that is all that I'm going to talk about today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you for listening. This has been Martinis with Scott. I'm Scott Sinclair, a show about winning momentum in life and business. And in business, we are on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Please subscribe.